everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host, coming to you from Chicagoland. I'm picking up a load here. I had a 5 o'clock appointment. It's now like, 6. The guy beside me came here basically at the same time, and he said his friend told him it takes like 6 hours here. So, it'll probably be a late night. So a couple of things I wanted to talk about. One is about driver experience and why it doesn't really matter that much. But first I want to circle back to the video that I did about this guy, Jonathan McJunkin, leading the efforts to stop Love's from building a new truck stop next to I-35 in New Braunfels, Texas. So somebody must have found that video, because all of a sudden, within minutes, I got like 2 lengthy rebuttals from people that clearly live in that neighborhood or very close by. And I said, okay, rather than continuing to like go back and forth, I said, I'll just address your concerns. So the issue, as I understand it from these folks, and I'm sure that they're correct, is that the property that Love's wants to build on is zoned commercial. And when these people bought their homes, it was zoned commercial. However, because Love's is a truck stop, and it may be because they need to bury fuel tanks, or there's, I don't know what the reasons are that they would need a special use permit. I'm not up on Texas property law or the zoning laws in New Braunfels, but these folks are saying, hey, we don't have a problem with it being commercial. We are just opposing the special use permit for Love's. And so, and I'm like, that's fine, because that's their right. They have a right to do that. And I'm, if nothing else, I'm all about due process. And, you know, the ability to redress grievances in the courts or with regulatory bodies. Now, having said that, and again, that's certainly, that's their prerogative, that's their right under the law as far as I can tell. But the arguments that they're putting forth are not, I mean, I know that they sound good to people that are putting them forth, but they really don't pass muster when you think about commerce in this country. And, you know, that's a big deal. And constitutionally, it's a big deal. Courts have often thought it's a big deal. And so one of the arguments is, well, there are these other truck stops within just a few miles. Why do we need another one? And I guess my retort to that is that if you owned a piece of property and somebody said, hey, there are other, you know, like you owned a piece of property and you were a Wendy's franchisee already, and you were like, hey, I want to build another Wendy's in this town or whatever. If somebody came out and said, look, within a half a mile, there's a McDonald's and a Burger King, why, you know, we don't need another fast food joint. Well, your response would be, well, wait a minute, that's taking away my rights to use this land. And you know, one of the arguments too is that it will be so close to their property, you know, so close to their pool and their common area. And I understand what they're saying. I wouldn't want it that close to my neighborhood. But I also would have done things way before now to control what that property could be used for. And so it's kind of like, again, the process is the process. But when you buy a property, and this is true anywhere in the country, when you buy a residence, right, especially if it's a new construction and it's like somebody went out on a piece of dirt and they, some developer, and they just threw up a bunch of houses, and you're like, oh, this is a nice neighborhood. Well, all that other dirt that's across the road from your neighborhood and behind your neighborhood and to the side and to the other side, and all that dirt that you drive by to get to your neighborhood that's kind of out in the middle of nowhere and quiet, all of that is owned by somebody else. And they have the right to use that property in a way that benefits them. I mean, that's the law. That's property rights 101, or they just call it property 1 in law school. And so that stuff is enshrined in a lot of places, not just zoning codes and stuff. But if you want to live close to things like a highway, you shouldn't be surprised that other things go up nearby. I mean, I look at I first went out to Utah, so Salt Lake City down to Provo, that area, that I-15 corridor. I first went out there in 1991. There was so much raw land, or just maybe farms, whatever, between Salt Lake City and Provo. Now, you couldn't plant a geranium out there. There's just no space. There's a gazillion businesses. There's, office buildings and all sorts of stuff. And so, I get that I understand NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard. I understand that people don't want this. But here's the thing. If the owners of that land before Love's got it, and maybe Love's doesn't have it yet, maybe the owners are the ones that are pursuing that variance or that special use permit, so when they sell the land it already has it. That might be the case. But if the owners of that land bought it knowing that, especially if they owned it before that subdivision went in, and I don't know, but they bought it for a reason. They were investing, and that's just how real estate is. And so if a commercial, if a piece of land zoned as commercial is the neighbors get to control it, that has a chilling effect on any investment. And it's basically like saying, hey, we don't own that, we don't have any rights to that, but if you don't put on that land what we want, I don't know what they want. Maybe they want another ugly 6-story office building. Maybe they want another, big box store. I don't know what they want. And I said in response to one person, I said, if you really want to control what's on that land, because here's the question, right? What are they going to do if that variance is granted? Well, the answer might be that they're going to go to court and try to get it reversed or whatever. But then that's where you get into the takings clause. And the takings clause is part of the Fifth Amendment. And it basically says the government can't take without just compensation. But here's the thing, and there are famous zoning cases where the courts have said, hey, you can zone, that municipalities can zone. There's the not Berea, Ohio. It's right outside of Cleveland. It's a famous zoning case, but also you can't just, like, after somebody starts the wheels in motion, pull the rug out from under them. Am I mixing a metaphor there? I might be. But you can't just throw up a stop sign once somebody's, like, up to speed and expect that they're going to change. So we'll see. I'm kind of interested to see what's going to happen. You know, I do know this, that Love's, you know, there's obviously a need for another truck stop, because if there wasn't, Love's wouldn't be building one there, or trying to build one there. Okay, so enough about Mr. McJunkin and his neighbors. And I'm happy to have this debate. I mean, I don't really have a dog in the fight, except that, you know, you got it. If you want to control stuff, you got to pay the price. Maybe they could just outbid Love's for the property. Maybe that's what the HOA should do. Anyway, so why do I say that experience doesn't really matter? Well, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were telling me how, company driver pay is escalating around the industry. But they were telling me how at some companies, you know, the company has a really high rate of pay, and they do expect some level of experience, like, I don't know, a couple of years, right? But then once you have that, they don't differentiate between somebody that has, say, the minimum amount of experience they require, like 2 years, and somebody that has, say, 10 years of driving experience. And apparently people that have, 10 years or 15 or 20 or whatever, 32 years, they are upset that they don't get paid more than the guy like me that only has a couple of years of experience. But and again, this is part of what happens when people they work in an industry that they don't really understand. You know, it's funny that guys that have 10 years, 20 years experience don't understand how this industry works yet. Like, all these years, they've been, not curious, not interested. All they wanted was a paycheck. They didn't care about anything else. They wanted to know, how much are you paying me per mile? They didn't want to know, where does the money come from? How does it happen? None of that, right? But it's worth knowing how the sausage is made, if you're in an industry. So, and the reason that experience doesn't matter is this: customers don't pay for it. When I was an attorney, right, clients would often want to know, how much experience does this attorney have? Have they ever handled a matter like this? How many times have they been in court? So in law firms, this first year associate, or going back to my example, the second year associate does not get billed out at the same rate as the partner who's been practicing for 10 or 15 or 20 years. Why? Because that's just how the market is, right? The more experience you get, the more valuable that clients think you are. I don't necessarily buy into that, but that's just how that industry is, right? But in this industry, nobody pays extra for sending a driver that has 15 years to bring their cargo to them. They don't care. They don't care if you've had a CDL for 10 minutes or 10 years. They don't think about that. All they think about is, what am I paying to get my cargo from A to B safely? That's it. They don't care if you get speeding tickets. All they care about is that you didn't drive down a ravine and tear that trailer open and spill all their stuff out on the side of the road. And even then, they kind of don't care, because that's what insurance is for, and that burden's on the carrier. But you can't expect a company, and now I know there are companies that have regimes that pay, like Knight, for example. They have this regime where the more miles you get with Knight, that's how you get pay increases. But you got to understand the market that your company operates in. the company has no incentive to pay you more because it can't ask for more from its customers. So it makes no sense to pay the guy with 10 years 68 cents a mile and the guy with 2 years 60 cents a mile. You know, now if there are other ways to kind of, you know, use your experience, but that's not really one of them, right? So for those drivers out there that want their experience to count for something, it does. But it might not show up in your paycheck. It might just count for how efficient you are, how you're just better at doing certain things, and you have an easier life because you know more. But you got to understand your value in the marketplace, and your value is cargo A to B, right? If you take a trip that no one else wants to, then that increases your value, right? But that's the law of supply and demand. But if it's a run that everybody's willing to take, and a shipper and receiver that everybody's willing to go to, then your 10 years of experience in 2 years is the same thing. And I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news if that bothers you. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. We'll come back with some more info tomorrow on some stuff, and stay safe out there. Bye.